Hey everyone, it's Amanda Radke back for another episode of the Heart of Rural America podcast, the show where we highlight great people doing inspiring things in their communities. Today, I have a very special guest, a dear friend of mine, and it's kind of a merging of two worlds. You guys know I focus on rural America and entrepreneurship and really highlighting farmers and ranchers who are doing unique things in business. But today, I'm going into another segment of my life, which is the carnivore world. So if you guys didn't know, I've been a carnivore for 10 years. I probably need to do a whole episode on that, on how I found myself eating all meat and animal products to really solve a lot of health problems that I had many years ago. But I will say it's the secret sauce to all my energy and all the things that I do now is my secret weapon is eating beef all the time. So today I am bringing on a friend that I hold very dear and near to my heart, who is from that carnivore community that I also hold very dear. Serena Musick, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I am honored to be here.
Wow. Well, it's so fun. We just got done recording her podcast. So you guys need to go check out. She's got a fabulous YouTube channel, which it's called, do you call it Carnivore Revolution?
Yep.
Correct. So the
hmm
Carnivore Revolution, you got to go check out her YouTube channel. She highlights and interviews all kinds of people from all walks of life who have discovered that things like beef can all of a sudden magically cure a lot of problems. So I always say, it's amazing that the American cattle rancher has the secret to health and wellness right in their freezer and right in their pastures in their backyard. And so Serena is proof of that, someone who has found that carnivore diet and has thrived. So I guess to start, Serena, tell us a little bit about your story and how you stumbled upon the carnivore diet and a little bit about what you do.
I certainly did stumble upon it. I had eating disorders and disordered eating basically my whole life. I bought my first diet pills when I was 12, if that tells you anything. And it's been hard. I just turned I'm almost 51. I was going to say I just turned 50. I turned 50 almost a year ago, and it was hard for 37 years. I had disordered eating. Whether it was for years, it was binging and purging. So I was bulimic for years. And then even after once that part went away, I was still binging and then restricting and punishing myself and not eating for a week or juice fasting for a week after, a bad weekend of binging. Definitely a carbohydrate addict. And there are people who think that that is not a real thing, but it totally is. And there are many of us out here that can attest to the fact that we literally could not stop with the carbohydrates and the sugar and the junk food no matter how hard we tried. And it was funny because I was always really careful with my kids. Like my kids' first foods were mashed bananas. I never even bought baby food. They would get green beans out of a can with no salt added. I would open it in the car at a stoplight and dump the water out and hand it back to them for their snacks. They ate normal things too, like goldfish, and things like that when they were younger. But I was always pretty careful. Like it wasn't like lots of junk food. And so it's funny that I was binging on those things, but trying to protect them from it because I didn't want them to be like me. And then I got a sickness that shall not be named about a little over 3 years ago. So it was December of 2020, I guess. Was that the big first year? It was, right? That was the whole big first year. And I lost my sense of taste and smell. And when it returned, it didn't return normal. It returned as distorted taste and smell. It's called parosmia, is what the condition is called. And many, many things smelled and tasted like rotting skunk flesh. I mean,
Wow.
the most horrible smell. So that smell you smell when you smell a skunk, imagine that following you around everywhere you go. My husband came home one time and found me in our camper crying because one of our daughters was making eggs and I couldn't be in the house while she was cooking them. I mean,
Oh,
it was just really, really bad for a long time. I would go to people's houses and I wouldn't be able to eat. I finally bought these almost like a little silicone nose ring that I could put an essential oil on and wear like on the tip of my nose. So I would smell that instead of, whatever the horrible smell was. And it lasted 2 years and 8 months. And it was actually last July when now it wasn't as bad. It was healing gradually, but over 2 years and 8 months, for probably the first 6 months I was carnivore, I couldn't even eat chicken or eggs. It was very difficult. But I was having a hard time and I was crying all the time right after it started, maybe 2 or 3 months in. I was crying all the time. Like it is life altering. I couldn't go to normal restaurants. I couldn't eat normal seasonings, garlic, onion, peanut butter, popcorn, coffee. So many of the things that I was used to eating on a normal basis were off limits now. It was very, very difficult thing. It affected my everyday life every single day.
Wow.
And so I was eating lots of sugar because it was the only thing that really tasted and smelled okay. And so it was my 47th birthday, and my girls, who have a gluten free baking business and make really good things, made me my favorite cupcakes. And I was like, double the batch. I mean, that's where I was. Like, I was down in the dumps, crying every day in the shower. I mean, I was really depressed over it. It was a very hard time for me, worse than any postpartum depression I had with 4 kids. I mean, it was very difficult. And so they made me the cupcakes, and I ate 20 in 36 hours. It was
Wow.
over a weekend. And I woke up on Monday morning and said, okay, I mean, I was miserable. I woke up on Monday morning and said, okay, I got to do something different. I mean, I am binge eating beyond control here. I was gaining weight. I was bloated. I was swollen. I was miserable. And
Hmm.
so I was like, okay. So at that point, I knew the only thing I could eat was a hamburger fresh off the grill and a New York strip fresh off the grill. I couldn't eat them after they had been refrigerated and reheated because some chemical reaction made them smell like a skunk. I don't know. So that's what I decided I was going to eat. I couldn't eat fruits and vegetables because they tasted and smelled like skunk. So that's what I decided I was going to eat the hamburger and the New York strip. And after about a week, I was able to maybe add a ribeye in. I felt really good. But that day that I decided that, I hadn't done any research at all yet. And I thought, what's going to happen to me if I do this? And
Right.
so I started Googling it, like, can I just eat meat? What happens if I do this? And that's when I found Kelly Hogan and Laura Spath and you and the Joe Rogan podcast with Sean Baker on it, which is, I think, how 90% of people become carnivores.
Right.
I started reading all this stuff, and listening to podcast after podcast and YouTube video after YouTube video. I was like, wait, what? Wait, people are just eating meat? Like, and I used to love my vegetables. I mean, I did. There were dishes that I really enjoyed. There is like nothing like a really good crisp green salad with all the good stuff in it, and a really great dressing and a lot of cheese too. Let's not
Right.
forget that's what
Yep.
most of us do to our salads. But I ate vegetables every day. I mean, I was vegan for a while. I was vegetarian. I was a juicer. I made juice almost every day. I mean, I was healthy. I thought I was healthy. I thought I was doing what I needed to do. And so I just continued to do research. And about 6 months into carnivore, it's just, I was just doing it. You know what I mean? I
Sure.
wasn't talking about it very much. I
Hmm.
was just kind of doing it. And about 6 months in, I heard somebody talk about the difference between an abstainer and a moderator. And that's when it clicked that I was better, that I wasn't binging anymore, that I wasn't starving myself. I wasn't like punishing myself anymore, that I was just eating meat, eggs, and cheese. And I was feeling really good. I wasn't losing weight at that point. I was gaining weight. Turns out I was under eating, but I was feeling pretty good. I
Right.
felt feeling the fact that I didn't have an eating disorder anymore was shocking to me. And then I realized my anxiety was gone. My varicose veins were almost gone. Like, there were so many things that were different. And then I started comparing pictures. And even though I wasn't losing weight, my body was different. My face was different. Like, the inflammation that had gone down just really amazed me. And so it was, like I said, it was about 6 months in before I realized this is actually helping me. Not, I was hoping to heal my taste and smell, but it was actually helping me with so many other things. And I just stuck with it. And it'll be 3 years for me on May 24th.
It's so awesome. And I mean, that was my experience really is the freedom that came with not having to worry about overeating on something
Yeah.
that made me feel awful.
Yes.
Yeah, for people, I really don't talk about it. I've being carnivore for going on, well, it'd be 11 years now, but over a decade. And at that time, I was on thyroid medicine. I was pre-diabetic. I was losing hair. I was cold all the time. I had
Ah,
no energy to even walk to the mailbox and I
yep.
couldn't get pregnant. We had a long stretch of infertility, and I stumbled upon that carnivore community and Kelly
Mhm.
Hogan, and started eating meat in April. And by that July, I was pregnant, and then had 3 babies back to back. Got off all
Amazing.
medicine, lost the extra weight, and feel like $1 million. And it is. What's frustrated me and it's why I should talk about it more is because this is the beef ranching community that I'm a part of. And I've grown
Right.
up in the cattle business my whole life. And I tried every diet and counted calories and worked out and done
Mhm.
everything I could and always struggled with my weight and not feeling right.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now the solution was in my backyard in the pasture the whole time. Like, talk about
Yeah.
frustrating. And
Mhm.
yet, that is great news. If you're a cattle producer listening to this, we have a superfood product that we raise. We have a nutritional powerhouse, despite the fact that the government and everybody, politicians and celebrities, every single day they're talking about cow farts and how cattle are destroying the planet and beef is bad for our health. And yet, as I often say, the truth is on our side. But the
Yeah.
truth doesn't make the billionaires and the trillionaires and the politicians rich and powerful. But the truth is right here in the heartland on these cattle ranches where cattle graze and upcycle that grass and convert it into beef. So it is great news. And you and I are testaments of that. And I must say, you don't look 50
Thank
at
you.
all. You look very young and youthful and vibrant. So you've got 4 kids, you guys
Right.
homeschool,
Mhm.
and you also have a business. So on
Yeah.
top of the Carnivore Revolution, which is such a great resource for people wanting to learn about the carnivore diet, I am a huge fan of your products. So I have it on my I have it linked in my Instagram if you want to go check it out in my link tree. But you guys can use code RADKEY to save on the products at Purely Tallow. So I just kind of, for folks watching, if you're listening, you won't be able to see, but I've got a salt scrub here. I've got the creamsicle tallow balm. I've got, this one is really exciting. You got to tell the listeners more about it, but it's whipped tallow lotion with Bulgarian rose. I have an overnight mask that repairs and restores. And I don't know why it took me so long to, yeah, look how pretty that is. And it goes on smooth. It does not smell like beef at all. You're not going to smell
Not at
like a
all.
hamburger as you're running around. But it's taken me a long time because the skincare market is huge and there's so much money in that. And you've got all of these companies that are selling you the promise to a youthful face. And it really took me until the last couple of years to realize, hello, if beef is good for me on the inside, why wouldn't it be good for me on the outside with my largest organ, which is my skin? And so I
Mhm.
guess tell me a little bit about Purely Tallow and how that business came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, this is your grandmother's lotion. This is what we used before we had all of those products that are made in factories and the plant-based products. Like, if you just really sit and think about it, they really just don't make sense. I mean,
Mhm.
how is our skin supposed to safely and reasonably absorb something, from a plant? Have you ever seen how hard it is to get an oil out of a plant? Like, if you look it up, if you haven't seen the process on how they make vegetable oils and how they get the oils out of, like, how much do you have to mess with a piece of corn to get some oil out of it, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, there
Right.
is no oil in corn. And those are the kinds of things they want us to use on our skin. But beef tallow on a cellular level is so much more compatible for our skin. On a cellular level, it is very, very close to what our skin is already made up of. And so it absorbs really well into our skin. Um, so it started because, like I mentioned, my girls have a gluten-free baking business. They don't do it at our farmers market anymore. They just kind of take special orders now. But they were selling at the farmers market at the time, and they were little. They were like 9 and 11, and they needed my help, right? And so
Sure.
by the time they were like 12 and 14, or maybe 11 and 13, they really didn't need me anymore. So I was just kind of sitting there. And so I asked the manager, can I have a booth too? And that was during the pandemic. And so I was selling like mask spray. I was just trying to find something that I could help the community and also, have my own booth at the farmers market. And then I just kind of transitioned into like a coconut oil lotion, which a lot of people use coconut oil, and coconut oil is fine. But again, it's a vegetable oil. It
Mhm.
is not as compatible with our skin as tallow is. And so I just started hearing about tallow after I became a carnivore and about how amazing it is. And I thought, so I just started kind of using it myself. And then I transitioned my stuff at the farmer's market over into that. And it sold really well. So I started putting it online. And now I have a website and about 15 or 16 different products. I think there are 9 different scents of the whipped tallow lotion, everything from Madagascar vanilla, jasmine, Bulgarian rose. The blue lavender is the most popular. That one has lavender and blue tansy essential oil in it, which are both really great for reducing fine lines and wrinkles. So I do think that there is a place for some animal products. I do think there is I do think that there is a place for plant-based
Yeah.
products like essential oils. Essential oils can be used medicinally for sure. I just think getting oil out of our vegetables is a little bit too much to ask, right? And so I do use some scents, but if you don't like the scents, that's fine. Every product is also available in an unscented version. So like the blue lavender, like I said, the fine lines and wrinkles, and then there's also a nighttime cream now that is really great to put on before you go to bed. It's a little bit greasier because it's not a whipped tallow, but it
Sure.
doesn't matter because you're going to bed anyway. And it's got Roman chamomile, lavender, and frankincense in it, which are very good for your skin. And so I'm trying to keep it mostly animal based though. And so a lot of the products have wild camel hump fat and emu oil in them, which are also both really great for your skin. The lip balm has goose fat in it, which is known for healing or preventing cold sores. So we're putting some research in, for these products that we're making and deciding which oils to use and then which scents to use. And like I said, if you don't like the scents, that's fine. Everything is available in an unscented version also.
Sure. Well, so it's beautifully packaged,
Thank
and
you.
I'm pretty partial to. I love the creamsicle scent. I love the peppermint. I feel like it wakes me up when I use it. But even just the Bulgarian rose, it feels very rich, and I'm like listening to you talk. I'm like, I need to put more on here. But tell me, so you described it as grandmother's lotion. How
Yeah.
did you learn the art of making this tallow product?
Honestly, I don't know. I did lots of research first. And just, I read that you could whip it. And so I tried it both ways. I tried it not whipped and I tried it whipped. And so my first products were whipped because it does tend to be less greasy
Sure.
than, I mean, like, just normal beef tallow is very greasy. But once you whip it, it really does change and it turns into this white, fluffy, it almost looks like whipped cream. It's actually whiter than whipped cream, even. It just
Right.
such a nice light feeling and you don't need very much. A little bit goes a really long way. So like I said, I tried it both ways and then I did lots of research like which essential oils can I add for the people that want the essential oils. And I've actually been a wellness advocate for an essential oil company for years, so I taught classes on that, like for natural healthcare and natural cleaning, so I already had a background with this. So
Sure.
they're my scents aren't just like willy-nilly, like, oh, I'm just going to put lavender in that one because people like lavender, like specifically lavender and blue tansy, because they are both really good for your skin, reducing fine lines and wrinkles. The age spots that we get or the sunspots that we get, they can reduce the appearance of those. And then, like the creamsicle one that you have, has wild orange essential oil in it, which I'm actually going to change to green mandarin on there because green mandarin is the only citrus oil that doesn't cause photosensitivity. So it normally a citrus oil can cause you to get sunburn faster, and
Oh.
so I don't want that to be an issue. But green mandarin doesn't cause that, so I'm actually changing that one to green mandarin with the vanilla in it to make the creamsicle instead of the wild orange. But so I spent a lot of time kind of deciding on which oils to use, like the night cream with the Roman chamomile, which is, a very expensive essential oil. It is really good for your skin. That goes back years and years and years, generations, with Roman chamomile being such a luxury item. So I wanted to be sure that was in the night cream. And so we spent a lot of time doing research and kind of deciding like the emu oil and the wild camel hump fat and what those are good for. And so we're just trying to make a product different. A lot of other companies like to use olive oil, coconut oil, or jojoba oil in theirs. And I just don't think it's necessary. I mean, sure, those things may be good for your skin, but I'd like to kind of stand apart a little bit and stick with mostly the animal products if I can.
Right. And so tell folks, where can they go shop if they'd like to source these products and buy from you?
Yeah, you can go to purelytallow.com and then it's Purely Tallow Skincare on Facebook and on Instagram. And you can just link to the shop from either one of those if you prefer that.
Well, so you mentioned kind of teaching and being in that wellness space. What prompted you to go from becoming a carnivore and addressing your own personal health issues to sharing it with the world and interviewing people all the time for your YouTube channel?
Honestly, I don't know. I think it just, like, you sit there and you watch all of these other people. And when I started watching all of these videos and listening to all these people talk, and then I was just posting, I just had a regular, Instagram page. I was just posting my meals, and then people start asking questions and things. And so you just kind of decide at some point that you want to help other people. And if
Mhm.
Kelly had not been sharing, if you had not been sharing, if Sean Baker had not, if all of these people had not been sharing their stories, I wouldn't have found out about it and I wouldn't feel as good as I do. And so
Right.
I just kind of decided that it was worth sharing if I could help some people.
Yeah, and I feel like it really has kind of taken off. Yes, definitely Sean Baker's a huge advocate for it. The Joe Rogan thing was wild. So if you
Yes.
haven't listened to that episode, just go look it up, Joe Rogan with Sean Baker. And
Yeah.
it really has brought this whole thing mainstream. Like I'm meeting people every week that are like, "Oh, I'm just trying carnivore," and
Yep.
10 years ago, I barely would have whispered it because it was
Yeah.
like, "You weirdo, what do you
I know.
mean?" And so for the
That's right.
longest time, I just kind of ate what I ate and didn't ever mention it to people. I just was
Mhm.
the popular one that would show up at parties and family gatherings with like a really awesome meat dish because
That's
I
right.
wanted to make sure I had something to eat. But turns out people really like meat and
Yeah.
cheese and all the things. So it's really cool to see. And I also just see it kind of as kind of a referendum on what the government has pushed for so long with the dietary guidelines for Americans. I mean, when those were introduced in 1980, and we've seen just the scope of that change so much over the years to now it's including things like sustainability and animal welfare and things that have nothing to do with nutrition.
That's
And
right.
yet on the flip side, we've seen the rates of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and cancer and infertility and the list goes on skyrocket. I mean, I would say that the nutrition program in our country has been the worst human experiment. Certainly in our lifetimes, but probably in generations. And
Mhm.
at some point, we're going to have to say, I don't think the government has this right. I mean, they openly admit that they're very heavily lobbied every year when they come up with those dietary guidelines, and they're influenced by industry and not real science. And when I know a lot of my listeners might say, like, well, who cares about the dietary guidelines? And yet it impacts our schools, daycares, nursing homes, hospitals, military. And so I think the more and more people like you that step out and say, like, hey, I turned this whole thing on its head, changed my life, reclaimed my health, and I did it with something very simple like beef. It's going to be harder and harder to ignore that. And maybe we could change the next generation and how they look at really as food as medicine and food as health and wellness. So I guess what's been the response to your YouTube channel? Like I'm sure you've reached people far and wide. What does that mean to you when you connect with someone that's looking for that information that can help them on this journey?
I think I think it's worth doing, and I know you do too. I think it's worth doing because every time, like you mentioned that we just interviewed you again for my channel, so that's the
Mhm.
second time. But there are going to be a lot of people that see this one that didn't see the first one. Now we did talk about some other things that we didn't talk about
Right, right.
first time, but every time we make a video, every time I post, what I ate today, every time I talk about, book recommendations for the carnivore diet or for health or something like that, it's going to hit somebody that it didn't hit last week, last month, or last year. And so I think we just have to keep striving for it and just keep going and teaching people about it if we really want there to be a revolution, if we really want to turn this thing around. And like you said, um, some people will say, well, what does it matter? I don't follow those guidelines anyway, right? But your kids do in school, your grandparents do in a nursing home, your family members in the military, they have to follow those guidelines. And so it I don't know that it'll happen in our lifetime where things kind of get turned around when you think about the massive undertaking that it would be to change all of that stuff. Like the meals used to be made by the lunch ladies. It used to be a home cooked meal for all
Mhm.
of those kids in the lunchroom. But now there are so many people, that's maybe not possible anymore. And so there are so many children in the schools, maybe that's not possible anymore, but there has to be a way to feed them healthier than that. I mean, you see it and I see it, and other people probably see it all the time. People post pictures of what it looks like when a diabetic patient in the hospital, somebody who's had a diabetic episode and is in the hospital, the meal that they bring them is toast with jelly, with margarine instead of butter, and maybe a couple of pancakes and one strip of bacon with some orange juice. And
Yep.
that meal is just going to send them back into a diabetic episode. They're going to have to
Yep.
use more insulin for that meal. And so, but they're following whatever the guidelines are.
Yep.
And so that's going to be such a massive undertaking for people to change. And so I think that's why I keep talking about it, is just that at some point, somebody important, somebody who can make a difference is going to see this. And I feel like, and I talked to Nina Teicholz about this, I think every member of Congress and everybody everybody in Washington that means something should have a copy of her book. And I think
Oh,
that's what can really change it. So for those of you who don't know, her book talks about kind of where the food pyramid, where the dietary guidelines came from. And it was one guy, his name was Ansel Keys, and he said, I think fat is bad for us,
yeah.
basically. And it made the cover of Time magazine, and that was it. I mean, it was like, how are they ever going to undo that? And it's not just in America; it has affected all these other countries. And it turns out he was wrong, and he did a giant study called it's called the 7 country study, but really he and his wife and his partners, they traveled all over the world studying Inuit people, studying, the diets of different regions and different countries. And when they got back, the data didn't meet their hypothesis. And so it was actually a 22 country study. And all of the other ones the studies said that meat wasn't bad for you, but they cherry picked the 7 that they wanted, and that's the study they released. And you can find that information online. That is just normal information that's available, but that's where, and then he helped create the dietary guidelines. And so it was created on false information. So like you said, this is like the worst experiment in American history. And people are dying. People are sick, and people are dying because of it. And I really believe the only way we can fix it is to just keep being outspoken and just talk about this. I think we have to talk about it so that people will see and say, wait a minute, is that true? Like, get Nina Teicholz's book. It's called The Big Fat Surprise. Get that book. That is a great way to kind of introduce yourself into this world that Amanda and I are talking about.
Yeah. And I remember when I first got started writing for Beef Magazine years and years ago, when I first kind of entered into this beef world and communicating in the ranching business, Nina was just kind of hitting the scenes, and I got to interview her. And yeah, instantly when you mentioned, I was like, she was the one that came to mind right away,
Yeah.
because she has been such a strong advocate. She's so heavily involved. And the other thing I thought of as you're describing that hospital meal, I remember after I got done having all 3 kids, and that's the meal they deliver you, and you're just like, this is it? I went to all this work to birth this baby, and this is what you bring me? Like, back in the day, hospitals used to serve steak for the husband and the wife to have in the hospital to celebrate their baby,
Yeah.
because that steak is celebration and
Right.
it's nutrition. And now it's toast and a flimsy little sandwich and some orange juice. And
Terrible.
yeah, so my husband's having to like black market sneak beef and cheese into the hospital so I can have it in the cooler. Like, I don't want this trash. Don't
I
send it
know.
to me.
It's
Like,
terrible. Just
it's
don't bring me a meal. Yeah, you
it's
just tell them, just keep the
yep,
food in the kitchen. I don't want it.
just keep it. I know, like, bring me
Mhm.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, I'm thinking about the people listening to this, and maybe they're sitting in a tractor cab and they're planting right now, or maybe they're going to a cattle sale listening to this, or maybe they're from the carnivore world in an urban area. But wherever you are, if you are thinking about the carnivore diet, Serena, I'd love to hear your best advice for how to get started. How do you execute this not diet, but way of life?
Yeah, just eat meat. And I know it sounds like it couldn't possibly be that simple. And I think when you say meat, people automatically just think it's an all red meat diet. But if you really sit down, Google it, there are all kinds of lists online for carnivore diet foods. If you really look, the list is huge. And the truth is, we all eat the same foods like every day anyway. Everybody out there does, right? Like,
Right.
you stock your refrigerator with the foods for the week. You eat the same things all week long. So if you just stock your refrigerator with the animal products instead, meat, eggs, and cheese, you can have seafood, you can have pork, you can have, which includes bacon and pork chops. And when you think about the list, you can have chicken. Chicken breast is very lean, so it is good if you pair that with a fat, because this is, and people will say, oh, but your kidneys, your liver, blah, blah, blah. This is not a high protein diet, it's a high fat diet, which I know is worse for people to even hear. Like, they'd rather do high protein than high fat. It sounds crazy that it's a high fat diet, but most of us eat about 80% fat every day, 80% of our calories, and it's delicious. It's good, healthy food. So my advice would be, start with one meal. If you've already had breakfast and lunch today, go ahead and start with dinner and just have the meat for dinner. And then tomorrow, get through breakfast, get through lunch, and get through dinner. Don't look at it like, oh, I'm never going to get to have a piece of cake again. Just say, I'm going to get through this meal, and then I'm going to get through the next meal, and I'm going to get through the next meal, and get through a few days like that, literally one meal at a time, like an alcoholic does, one day at a time. And I know you're thinking, oh, like an alcoholic, but I promise, you cut out those carbs, you are going to feel like an alcoholic does when they go through withdrawals. And that should be a good lesson for you on how addicted you actually are. Because if you're sitting there right now thinking, I could never do that because I could never give up, fill in the blank, you're an addict.
Yep.
You have, if you really think that you couldn't give that up. Now, if you want to keep your coffee in, that's fine. Most people keep coffee in. But I think if you're sitting there thinking, I could never give up my bagel, or I could never give up my cereal or my oatmeal or whatever it is, my McDonald's for lunch, you're probably an addict and it is going to be hard to quit. So don't discount that and just act like it's going to be easy, because for most people, it's not easy. But McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's and Five Guys all have 100% ground beef hamburgers. So you can go there and get it without the bun or get it with the bun and throw the bun away, whatever you want. Some people don't want to order something like special. That's fine. But those tricks make it super easy to stop and grab something to eat. And so I think my biggest tip is one meal at a time, and then
Mhm.
one day at a time, and then one week at a time. And before you know it, you'll have a month under your belt. And then it's easy. Like,
Right.
because you'll feel so good at that point, it makes it so much easier to stick with it. So try it one meal at a time and one day at a time and see where it gets you.
Mhm, and I would say I think 2 mistakes I see people make is number 1, they undereat. So then all
Yeah.
of a sudden they're ravenous and they go grab the carb, like something that comfort food or something quick and easy, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden they have to start all over and they feel awful. And I think people underestimate that there's kind of a detox, like almost like a flu you'll feel like as you're kind of
Mhm.
acclimating to basically you're going from running on ethanol to running
Yes.
on diesel. You know,
That's
it's
right.
like a totally different fuel source.
Yeah.
But once you get over that hump, and if you find those moments of weakness where you're starving, just go eat more meat. Don't count
Right.
calories. Don't like try
Right.
to undereat and diet. Just fuel your body, eat what
Yes.
you need, even if you maybe feel like you're overeating and you're stuffed, because it's hard to adjust to too. It's not the
Yes.
light salads and cucumbers and
Right.
things. It is a dense product like beef. It is dense and it's satiating. So it's an adjustment. But yeah,
Yes.
once you get past that hump, of
Hmm.
willpower, the best part is it's so freeing after that. You don't
Yes.
even have to think about it. It's autopilot. I used to have the biggest sweet tooth. Look at cookies and cakes. Like I would never turn down dessert. I loved
Yeah.
it so much. Like now I don't even look at it as food really. I
Right.
don't have
Yeah.
to like fight my brain to not eat it. It's just like,
Yes.
it's not on the menu. I'm going to eat a steak or I'm going to have some
Mhm.
bacon or some
Yes.
eggs. And great thing is all those foods are really rich and satisfying and give you so much energy. You don't have the blood sugar just crash in the afternoon and you need a sweet or a coffee to get going. You just have this you're just humming along and life is just really really good. I got to give a shout out. I got a buddy in California who is just 10 days or 2 weeks into the carnivore
Oh,
diet. He's lost 11 pounds already. So
amazing.
yes, it's awesome. It's awesome to see and it's happening every day all over the country, and you
That's
see it
right.
in that carnivore community. So Serena, just to kind of wrap, I guess, can you tell us where folks can follow along, where they can shop, where they can check out your YouTube channel, all the things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am serena.carnivore on Instagram, Carnivore Revolution on YouTube, and then you can find my tallow products at purelytallow.com and Purely Tallow Skincare on both Facebook and Instagram.
Wonderful. And I know you're out in Virginia, you're on the coast. I'm actually headed out your way in June 13th. I'll be at a live beef auction with a new company that I have with some great partners called Bid on Beef. Haven't talked about it on the show yet. We're just kind of been slow launching it on
Uh-huh.
social media, but I'd love to invite you to that beef auction on June 13th if you get a wild hair and want to hop up to New York. It'd be
I will
awesome to
totally
see you.
try to be there.
It would be great. I need to schedule like a whole meetup up there with all
Yeah,
the East Coast carnivores and make it like
totally.
a grand
Yeah,
farm to fork experience. So
yeah.
that's your official invitation. But
Thank
I sure appreciate you being on the show today and look forward to many more conversations to come. So we'll hope to see you on the Dusty Trail. You take
you.
care, Serena.
Okay, thanks. You too.